Hey Hawks, this is Father Kevin Gillespie, and you're listening to Sports and Rants with Brett and Pants. The Hawk will never die.
And we are live with former Philadelphia Philly, Eric Valent. How are you doing today, Eric?
Good. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
So spring training has started. What were your feelings when you were playing?
Those were great times. I mean, it's amazing that it's been about 16 years since I was drafted. So the time flies. I was in spring training from 1999 to about 2006, and it's just a great time of year. You're coming back from the off season, seeing a lot of your friends from the prior years, and just getting ready for a new start and on your way to the big leagues if you haven't been there, or just working to keep yourself there. But spring training is a great time. You have a little bit of free time, going to dinners, working hard, and it's just a great time of year, even for the fans as well.
Now, coming in when you were a younger guy, did you have a plan going into spring training? Do you see that with the younger players? Should they have a plan coming in?
Yeah, especially in the minor league level. Every player has a player plan to know what they have to work on. Of course, guys with a lot of success in the past are already going to be on the teams, and maybe they have a little bit more freedom to work on things. And you have other guys that could be on the bubble where they're grinding it out day after day, just trying to make an impression in order to make a club. So it varies per player. Myself, I was always going to be on a club and be a part of a minor league team on my way to the big league. So it's just maybe working on different things, maybe taking a strike, a couple at bats here and there, or trying to do a hit and run or something like that, just to work on things to get ready for the season.
How do you think the Phillies are looking so far down in Florida right now?
It's out of my department as an amateur scout, but we have some young guys looking to possibly get a lot of opportunities. As you know, you can see it's a little bit in transition, as Pat and Ruben have said, and it's we won for so long that we'll see how the young guys start playing, and I think there's definitely promise. And it's just such a tough game to compete year after year after year, and I think it was time to start seeing what we have with some of the younger guys and build the next 2018.
Now, you played with the Phillies, the Reds, and the Mets, and right now you mentioned that you're an amateur scout. How did you become an amateur scout?
I retired playing after my 2006 season. My fondest memories, coming up, I spent most of my minor league time coming up as a young player with the Phillies, had a lot of great connections, and I coached with us in 2008. I wanted to get into scouting right away, but there wasn't an opportunity. I live outside of Philadelphia. I had two young kids, and I didn't want to move for any position. And we had a coaching job available, so I did that. I really enjoyed it. I love teaching hitting. I love being around kids on their way to the big leagues. But scouting fit my family lifestyle a lot better. And a position opened up the next year, and I took over the Northeast area in 2009, and I did that for 4 years. And now the last 3 years, I've been a regional supervisor for us, focusing on the Northeast region and most of the Southeast region, working with about 3 area scouts, seeing their top players.
Now, in your opinion, what's the difference between scouting a player and seeing the talent level, and then playing with them or coaching that player?
Yeah, it's definitely a different perspective. When you're a coach, you have a lot of times you're emotionally invested in the player. You're day in and day out. You get to know them a lot more than a scout does. I mean, as amateur scouts, you're always trying to get to know the player, doing a home visit, talking to the parents and family. But especially when you're scouting a high school player, it's such a cocoon they're in. Whereas they're in their senior year of high school, they're best player on the team. It's success game after game. Maybe it's a bad game here and there. So you're seeing in the player an environment where everything's always good and there's not a lot of bad going on. Whereas as a coach, right away you're always going to see your players go through slumps and good times and bad times, and you definitely get to know the psyche of the player better than as an amateur scout, where we try to get to know them as much as we can. But realistically, a lot of times we don't get to see them in a failing type of atmosphere, and that's why as scouts we're trying to scout ability and make up as much as you can, but it's just about getting ability and talent into the system and then letting them go through the ups and downs and let them grow emotionally as a player through the minor leagues.
Are there any players coming into this spring training that you personally scouted yourself?
Yeah, I scouted as when I had the area. I had Jesse Biddle, so he had some unfortunate incidents last year with the hailstorm going through Reading, but I saw him a couple weeks ago, and he has a great frame of mind. Hopefully, he can build on some things and put all that stuff behind him and make his way towards Philadelphia. And then as a supervisor, my area scouts, we drafted Cord Sandberg, who's probably going to be in Lakewood this year. He was a two-sport athlete coming out of high school. He was a Mississippi State commit quarterback, and we signed him. We signed him out of high school, and he played in Williamsport last year. He's a strong kid, left-handed hitter. Hopefully, he takes the next step this year. Aaron Noel, we scouted last year, who was a really good pitcher, is good stuff, good head on his shoulder. He's got a bright future ahead of him. So those are a few guys that I can name for you, but there's a couple other down the road guys, but those three guys come to mind.
What are some things that we can see Jesse Biddle work on throughout his time down in Florida?
Yeah, for him, it's no different than any other pitcher. It's about consistency, throwing strikes with your stuff. That's pretty much what keeps guys out of, say, the big leagues, even AAA guys, or anybody per se, as far as being a consistent major leaguer, whether it be a hitter or a pitcher. It's just consistency in your outing. So I think that's the main thing. Is Jesse to show to pound the zone with strikes and be consistent start up to start, and if he can do that, he definitely has all the ingredients to be a really good starting major league pitcher.
Being somebody that played in the MLB, you played through the minors, do you think that you have a better perspective of what that potential major leaguer could be rather than some of the other scouts that maybe didn't play Major League Baseball?
I don't think you had to play Major League Baseball. I always said that I think when you're a scout, you don't necessarily have to play it in the major leagues or play it in the minor leagues, but it definitely helps as far as your perspective on players and the nuances and watching a game and maybe certain movements a guy is doing. As a player, you're always scouting. So I played even when I was younger, when you're in an on-deck circle, I'm scouting the pitcher, watching his release point. Is he throwing strikes? You're seeing the stuff come in. You're watching other hitters on other teams, what they're doing. You're constantly learning and scouting. So when I was a player, that all helps me come into play. And I think what gave me a heads up as an amateur scout when I got into it is I played extensive amateur baseball as a kid growing up in California. I was playing on scout league teams when I was in 8th grade, playing against junior college kids, playing against guys that were going in the first, second round, high picks, being a high-profile prospect myself coming out of high school and college. And that's kind of where I go back for my data bank and guys that have made it and maybe those who haven't, rather than, per se, my major league time. Definitely all my amateur stuff it weighs heavily on kind of my experience in my scouting skills now.
Could you just go into detail about like the mental toughness of a player and evaluating that aspect? Because we can see players that are far and beyond other players, much more talented, but they might not have that mental toughness, that ability to push themselves and keep them going. Yeah,
I mean, baseball is such a grind. I mean, when you think about it, like they always say, a 300 hitter, you're still out 7 out of 10 times. So I think the main thing as a player you have to put in perspective as a hitter is just to keep it simple and try to take the positives out of everything and not just thinking about getting a hit. Of course, the more consistent you are naturally and the higher average hitter you are, you're going to be more mentally strong just because you're going to be more at the top of the skill set among players. But it's that middle of the road guy, that 250, 260 hitter who has to be able to grind it out and mentally be ready every day to handle the slumps rather than a 280 or 290 guy. So definitely the middle of the road player outside of the top players has to be mentally strong and be able to leave the game at the field when he goes home, or else it can just be a mental grind throughout the year and may not be able to get the most out of your ability.
You mentioned how you, as a player, you're constantly learning. At what level did you feel as though you learned the most at? At college, at your time, you were considered one of the better players, having the most home runs in the Pac-10. Was it at college you learned the most?
Nah, I would say when you get up to AA and AAA, but it's in hindsight, it's easy. You're learning constantly, and I think each experience you learn something from, and you can constantly change and learn. You can't. everyone sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I wish I would have known this when I first started out." Well, it's easy to say that, but each level is a new learning experience. Everything you go through, and you're constantly adapting and learning. So it's hard to just throw everything on a young kid at one time. I think it's a process, and you never know really which way it's going to turn. So in the end, you try to keep it simple as much as possible because this game is so hard, and you try to learn to know what works for you, what doesn't, and again, that can change as the years go by and as you move up levels.
Now, as you spoke to yourself and you attested to it, that you were one of the highly scouted prospects in your area, and you now scout highly scouted prospects, how much pressure does that put on a player from your point of view, and does it make things more difficult for that road to the major leagues?
No, I don't think so. I never put any pressure on myself. As when I was a young player, I always knew I was going to make the major leagues. It was for myself. It was going to be okay. How good enough am I going to be able to stick in the big leagues? So most of these kids, like I said, they're in environments where they're best on the team most of the time, especially coming out of high school and before signing them. I'm not signing guys who are failing, or I mean, there's definitely prospects out of high school, and even at the college level, the higher all picks at some point are somewhat of a prospect, and some are better than others. But each one of them should have the drive and determination to think that they're going to be major league players, and then after that, it's just figuring out what you need to do as a player and what type of player you are in order to stick there.
Now, you as a player, you graduated high school, you actually drafted, but chose to go to UCLA instead of going right into the minor leagues. What made that decision for you, and do you want players to do that? Do you like players out of college now that you're a scout, or would you rather take them and develop them out of high school?
Both. If a player is mentally and physically ready to sign out of high school and we have interest in that player, of course he should, and that's his dream, is to be a major league player. He probably should sign out of high school regardless of course they all want large money, but if you're mentally and physically ready to go, you're going to develop the most right away. When you go to college, you're only going to play 4 days a week. Most of these programs now are highly competitive. Coaches are making a lot of money, and it's not about the player. It's about the team, and it's about winning. When you sign as a minor league player, the minor leagues is all about developing the player and the person in order for them to reach the major leagues with us or another team. So it's always better if you mentally and physically, if you're ready to go, to get into a system as soon as possible in order to get the most experience at an early age so you can get to the big leagues as quick as you can.
Let's go more in depth into the process of scouting. After the evaluation process has taken place and you understand the pros and cons of the player, how do you go back to the Phillies, and is there a meeting that you discuss which players you would like to take more of an interest in?
Yeah, so what happens is when we have the draft, as we draft players, we work together with our player development department, which is we have a lot of great instructors. Joe Jordan heads up our minor league, and he's a great guy, very passionate about his job. And we're in constant connection. They see our reports, they understand what type of player it is, and then our area scouts will send just kind of an email to all the staff, the player development staff, just to let them know kind of a little bit of background on the player, just to give them an idea of what they're going to be dealing with. But then again, like I said before, we try to learn about as much makeup as we can with the players, but it's amazing that when you send these players out, a lot of times when they fail, the player development starts to learn even more about the player than the area scouts were able to. So that's why in the end you always kind of draft players with the most ability as possible and get that in your system, and then hopefully as the years go by they can adapt and become solid major leaguers, both mentally as well.
How do you think your time at UCLA helped you develop into the major league player, and was that the reason why you chose to go to college rather than go right into the minors? You wanted to develop more as a player?
Yeah, I was a pretty polished player. For myself, I wanted to go in the first or second round of the high school, or else I was going to go to college, and I probably fit more about a fourth-round pick. And at that time, I felt it would benefit me more just to go to school, because I knew if I went to college, I was going to put up numbers and become better than a fourth-rounder. And and that's what happened. And it was a great experience for me. And of course, I look back on my career. I spent parts of 5 years in the majors, 2 full seasons. Who knows if I would have signed out of high school, if I would have had a different career. So, again, for me, it was good to go to college because I don't think physically I was never a real big guy. I was able to go there and just get mature more and be ready coming out of college. So for me, I think it was beneficial. But again, if you have players that are mentally and physically ready to go, it's definitely something that the players should entertain out of high school.
At UCLA, you actually got to play with some great MLB players, including Troy Gloss, Chase Utley, Eric Burns. Did those guys push you while you were in college, make you want to be better, and having that group of guys around you make you better and a better player?
Oh, I think definitely. If you're as a competitor, no matter when I was going to showcases or tournaments, I always wanted to impress and show your skills, whether it was throwing from the outfield, batting practice, running, hustling, all that type of stuff. So, and then during the season as a college guy, of course, you're competitive and you want to put up numbers and be one of the better guys on the team. So, but definitely not in a malicious way as far as I'm going to do better than this guy, But of course, success breeds success for everybody else. So it's nice being able to play on good teams where you have other good players because it's just easier for everybody to put up good numbers.
Watching a guy like Chase Utley now, who's still grinding it out every day, was he like that back at UCLA? And did you see this career path for him?
Yes, Chase has always been a self-motivated, highly big work ethic, just competitive individual. Could always hit a good fastball. Chase was a second-round pick out of high school, but chose to come to UCLA. And he's been a guy that's they don't make him like that very often, where he's just so intense and ready to play every day. The Phillies were fortunate to have him for the last 13 years, and they don't come around often like that when you get guys that are that competitive every day in and day out. I mean, so Philly's lucky to have a guy like him and be able to watch him the last 12 years. So yeah, it's something that he's always definitely had.
You being a very successful college player, you played with aluminum bats, and they still use aluminum bats today. Now, as a scout, would you rather see college ball players using wooden bats to make it easier on you to evaluate talent?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you'd like to see them wood all the time, but most of the better players are always swinging wood in the collegiate leagues and throughout the summer, and even some batting practice sometimes when you go to the games. So you still see them in swinging with the wood, but even though with the aluminum, you just try to look at their body, look at their bat speed, look at their strength, and most of the time it'll translate over.
Do you think that attributed to the number of home runs that you hit in college? The aluminum bats?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, you're always going to... Yeah, definitely. They were lethal back in the day. So.
Yeah, with all their changes they made.
But, when I went to the minor leagues, I still put 20 home runs a year. So I always had power. But, of course, I mean, you're going to have a little bit more leeway with the aluminum bats on certain pitches that they may go a little farther, whereas maybe they would have been a double with the wood bat. But guys that have power, they're going to hit them out with the wood as well.
Now, going into your career at the Phillies a little bit and that road to the majors, what was that like for you being drafted out of UCLA to the Phillies? Did you have any expectations as a young guy coming in?
No, I think as any player, you really don't care what team you're drafted on. It's about reaching your goal and your dream of playing Major League Baseball. So I worked as hard as I could day in and day out, maybe too hard at times, and it was just about getting to the big leagues and fulfilling your dream and being a good teammate and making the most out of your opportunity. Because, like I said before, it's been 16 years since I've been drafted, and I look back and I don't even know where the time has gone.
Now, when you were a young guy coming up, we hear stories from athletes saying that they were afraid to play in front of the Philadelphia crowd because of what they heard from them. Were you afraid being a bigger prospect, a bigger name prospect coming in, that the Philly fans wouldn't like you?
No, the last thing I was worried about was the fans. I was just worried about the big guy on the hump that day. So, I never got to that point. And again, for me as a player, I never became that type of high-profile major leaguer. but I could see where it can be tough, where you're a guy that's going to be counted on and a high profile player, and with the expectations, and that's why you have to be so strong mentally to be able to compartmentalize and just do what you can do and leave all the other stuff out of your mind.
Between college and going to the majors, is it the mental aspect that is the hardest thing to overcome?
Yeah, it's about, what keeps guys out of the major leagues is just consistency and being mentally strong. As we said before, it's such a tough game. It's so mental, and the failure rate is so high that you have to figure out a way to be able to show up day in and day out and offer something that's going to help the team win that day. And whether you're struggling or whether you're going well, it's about keeping everything in perspective and understanding it's a long season and being ready to go. So that's what keeps guys out of the big leagues, just consistency with your pitching outings or consistency with your at-bats. And it's about who can stay in that zone the longest. And that's why you see some guys sticking in the major leagues forever that can really hit, because sometimes it's just hard to find a lot of hitters.
To talk more about the different regional scouting, how do the Phillies scout regions that are overseas? You played in Japan a little bit. Can you go into that experience a little bit and how the Phillies would scout, let's just say, Japan?
Yeah, as Phillies, we have pro scouting department that scouts, of course, the major leagues, minor leagues. We have our amateur scouting that signs guys out of high school, college for the draft, and then we have the international department, which scouts guys internationally, Japan, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, all those places. So I'm not involved with our international department, but of course we have guys in it that we scout players in Japan, and I guess you try to compare them when they post them to guys on the free agent market at the major league level. Again, it's not something I'm directly involved with, but in the end, you're just kind of always comparing players and just seeing if they're better than what you have or they're better than what's on the free agent market, and what you decide to value them at.
What was your experience like overseas and the cultural difference with baseball?
Yeah, it's a different game. The reason you're going over there is to make some cash and to grind it through. You have the language barrier. It's very different. I had a good experience though. They treated you well. They provided you with a great place to live. You ate well. So I didn't end up playing that well out there, but it was a great experience and definitely recommend it for any of those players at the AAA level that or maybe don't quite have enough to reach the major leagues, but they're a great player that they can go over there and make a living and play baseball and keep their career alive.
We hear about some fun moments over in Japan all the time because of that language barrier. Do you have any funny stories playing over there?
No, not too many. I mean, I saw one of our pitchers get slapped by a coach, and something you never see in professional baseball over here. I was married. I had my 2-year-old son at the time. But nothing too funny. Just a different culture, great people, very nice, and I was fortunate enough to be there and spend some time there.
When you were over there, did you see any players, pitchers, especially we see a lot of pitchers from Japan, guys like that you said, wow, this guy should be in the major leagues?
Yeah, Matsuzaka was over there. He ended up coming over on my team. Iwakuma, who pitches for Seattle, was a young player on my team in Rakuten. So, yeah, definitely guys that you knew would have some talent to play in the major leagues.
Now, do you think it's harder for the transfer of talent from, say, like a Japan over to the United States rather than a guy coming from the Dominican or somewhere like Puerto Rico or Cuba?
No, I think just again, every player is a different instance, so I don't think there's any patterns. Baseball is such a hard game, like we said before, that it just depends on the player's physical abilities and his mental capabilities about whether they reach the major leagues. And there's no patterns of why this guy the Japanese players don't do this or Dominican. No, every player is a different instance just because of the failure rate in baseball. There really is no pattern. It's not like basketball or football where if a quarterback's good when he's making 7 out of his 10 passes. Basketball players are shooting certain percentages, but baseball, I mean, when you think about it, hitters, it's such a low success rate that it's hard to find really any patterns of who's going to have success and who's not. It's such a mental game, and knowing yourself as a hitter or pitcher of what you got to do to be successful day in and day out.
You mentioned before you liked coaching hitting the most. Is because it's so difficult to actually be successful at?
Yeah, I really like to coach young kids, especially now. I have 2 young boys, 10 and 7, and I try to all I do with them is I teach them things that I wish I would have known at an earlier age in order to help them have a consistent swing. So I like to work with the kids that are young, and hey, if they end up maturing, having some physical abilities and a passion for the game, hopefully I've set them up with the right fundamentals where they can be the best player they can be.
What's one of the things you try to instill into hitters? Is there anything specific besides a consistent swing that you think can lead them to that major league path?
Yeah, I think as a young hitter at a young age, you have to, of course, make sure you're holding the bat the right way, having a balanced athletic stance, and then it's all about learning your rhythm and how to get started. That's the biggest thing a kid has to learn at a young age, is having a proper load and stride, because if that's something that if you don't learn it right away, it's going to be hard to break. I mean, I've seen kids, usually your swing is your swing a lot of times. I mean, I bet you go back and watch Chase Utley swing when he was 12, and it was probably a very similar swing he has now. So you only have so much time to react to a ball that it's going to be very hard to change a swing. Something your eyes have been doing, watching a pitch come in for so many times as a young player. So it's about setting up and just learning that basic load and stride. And like I said before, it's about them as they get stronger, and if they have a passion for the game, if they're strong fundamentally, maybe they'll have a chance to play at a high level.
For you, what's it like scouting now on the side of pitchers? As you being a hitter in the majors, what's it like scouting pitchers for you? Is it based off velocity or mechanics?
Yeah, well, it's everything. It's repeating your delivery. It's your breaking ball. It's your fastball command. It's your size, your strength. Watching that ball come in, is you have deception. So there's really not one thing. It's everything. There's guys that have success that are not hard throwers that rely on command and solid secondary stuff, or there's guys that can just blow it right by you. So again, it's all individualized, and you try to get the guys that can throw the most strikes and get outs. That's what you're looking for.
With a guy that is like that hard thrower, that guy that hits 100 on the gun every single time, we see it like guys like Strasburg, players like that. Is it that automatically, if they can throw that fast, that they're going to be a guy that everybody wants and everybody goes after, say like the Phillies system, or is it if their mechanics aren't that great, just say they could just throw hard?
Yeah, of course, a velocity it's gonna be harder for the player to hit. So, but again, you still have to have a breaking ball or something to go with it. But as far as mechanics, you want guys that can throw strikes. So I'm not big. I don't know exactly. I don't really care about if something's a perfect delivery or this and that, as long as he can show the ability to throw his stuff for strikes and be in the zone and get out. That's the main thing, especially at the big league level. You see all kinds of deliveries. You see different ways guys get things done for them, and again, it's about being consistent and knowing you as a pitcher. I mean, baseball, it's like an art. It's a form rather than we're not machines and not mechanical. As a hitter, it's all about timing and rhythm and knowing what works for you. And it's no different as a pitcher. They got to do with their body. No one knows what their body feels like when they're getting to release that ball. So it's about that pitcher understanding his feeling in order to throw a strike with each pitch.
Now, Eric, as we're wrapping up here, final 2 questions. What would you say do you think is the highlight of your career? What do you think is most memorable about your career? And how do you think the Phillies will finish this season?
Different stages in my career. I was fortunate enough playing at UCLA. Looking back, I have the most home runs in Pac-10 history, so that's something I don't really care about, but it's good to be able to tell my kids. That's all I care about is for them maybe to just think about and give them something to drive for in whatever they do. As far as a professional, making it to the major leagues, getting my first hit in Fenway Park, hitting for the cycle in 2004. Of course, I would have loved to play in 10 years and made some money and coach Little Leagues the rest of my life, which for my kids. But this is the second best thing to that, being able to stay in the game and scouting and helping an organization. And as far as the Phillies go this year, hopefully guys can develop. The guys can stay healthy, and we can be on a track to the next the next competitive team in the future. You know, as Pat Gillick has stated before, we are in a little bit of a transition. I mean, we had prior to a couple losing seasons, we won 9 years in a row, which you could look back and not a lot of teams have done. It's such a tough game to be in it year after year, and we have some talent coming up through the minors. Hopefully, we can. Some guys can keep developing at the major league levels, and we'll see what happens with the veteran players. So there's a lot of things to like, and hopefully the fans can be patient and watch us develop.
Eric, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. We learned a lot on the scouting side and a lot about your career. Thank you.
Hey, no problem, guys. Anytime. Good luck with what you're doing.
Thank you.
This concludes our podcast of Sports and Rants with Brent and Pants. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Twitter @Sports and Rants. Like us on Facebook. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes. And visit our website, www.sportsandrantz.blogspot.com. It would help our rankings on iTunes if you rate and review our podcast. Thanks, and have a good day.